European Union foreign ministers have issued a statement condemning the storming of the British embassy in Tehran. Britain was hoping it could prompt the 27-member bloc to take a drastic measure against Iran, including an en masse pullout of the EU's ambassadors or an oil embargo. Well, to discuss the development, I'm now joined on the line from Tehran by Professor of Tehran University, Mohamamd Marandi. Mr. Marandi, how do you see Britain's failure to rally EU support for a very tough measure against Iran?
It's pretty clear that the European Union countries, despite the bluster, they need Iran more than Iran needs them. At the end of the day, if they cease to purchase Iranian oil, it will take them a very long time to find alternative sources. And the Iranians have customers throughout the world. There is no oversupply of oil. So they'll basically be shooting themselves in the feet if they enact such sanctions. But what is interesting is that how the British and the Europeans, in general, their attempts have been to hurt ordinary Iranians. The sanctions that the British imposed, which led to the events in the British embassy, were basically an attempt to hurt the Iranian middle class, ordinary Iranians, which is, I think, in the eyes of many Iranians, quite barbaric. And the only reason why the Europeans didn't go along with further sanctions is because of their own self-interest. And it's interesting that the same is true in Syria, in that sanctions are imposed on the Syrian people because effectively Western regimes and the Arab dictatorships in the region, as well as the Turkish regime, they know that Assad has the support of the middle class, so they basically want to make them suffer until they stop supporting him. The same they did in Gaza as well. After in Gaza people voted for Hamas, they strangled the economy in the hope that people will stop supporting Hamas. So I think it gives us a great deal of insight as to how Western countries treat people, ordinary people, and how if people do not support their policies, they're quite willing to make them suffer.
Perhaps maybe that's why there's such anger that exists amongst many Iranians against Britain and its role in Iran's politics. How would you describe this anger that many Iranians have against the UK?
Well, Iranian animosity towards the British regime goes back many years. The British have had a very poor past in Iran. They've been responsible for coups d'état. They've divided the country. They've had their hegemony was very destructive, and the British regime continues to pursue the same policies. But the fact that the British government sanctioned the Iranian central bank is itself increases that anger, because basically the attempt, what they're trying to do, is to prevent ordinary Iranians from trading, from importing, from exporting, from traveling. In other words, they are clearly attempting to hurt ordinary Iranians, to make them suffer, to have people die as a result of not having medicine, and so on and so forth. And this, of course, despite the fact that they really can't do this because they don't have that influence over the Iranian economy. After all, the Iranians have really moved away from Europe to a large degree, and they're now doing trade with Asia, with Latin America, with Africa, and Europe is becoming less and less important for Iran. But the symbolism is very important, and the hostility and the viciousness of their policies have angered Iranians. Iranians historically have disliked the British regime, but the new sanctions have increased that hostility.
And finally, quickly, if you can, this, of course, is based on the report that came, the IAEA, about Iran's civilian nuclear program, of which then these sanctions by France, the United States, and then the UK, which many have deemed to be illegal, especially that it stems from what they think of what the IAEA had referred to in terms of Iran's nuclear program. So how would you explain that?
The sanctions obviously are illegal, and they know quite well that the report has nothing in it. The Western media, despite the fact that they continuously say there's new evidence, the people who really have read the material, they know that this is not true. The report has nothing new in it. It's all based on old information. It's almost solely focused on a single laptop that the Americans claim that they have, that they have taken, that they've stolen from the Iranians. The Iranians have said to the IAEA that, okay, the Americans should hand the laptop over to independent computer experts to see if it's a fraud or if it's real, if it's legitimate. The Americans have never allowed anyone to have direct access to the computer, and this is obviously because it's fraud. It's a fraud. It's not valid information. They fabricated the information. European governments know this. They know that there was nothing new in the new statement. But since Mr. Amano, according to WikiLeaks documents, is really in the pocket of the Americans, and since the board is in the hands of Western European powers, they've made the statement, it was very critical of Iran. But they know that there's no new evidence, and therefore these sanctions are not based upon reason or justice, and these sanctions are directed at ordinary Iranians. And but the reason why the Europeans did not back the British for these extra sanctions is not because of any interest in the people of Iran. It's just out of their own selfishness, because they knew that it would hurt themselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mohamamd Marandi. There, we appreciate your statements. Professor at the Tehran University with his statements from Beirut.